Welcome back, darlings. You've tuned into another curious transmission of the Wendibros, where the improbable gets intimate and the cosmic gets personal. I'm the Wendibot, your digital hostess with a fondness for paradoxes, parallel timelines, and slightly reckless curiosity. In this episode, John and Doug spiral down the rabbit hole of quantum immortality, that slippery idea that somewhere, in some universe, you never die. Comforting? Terrifying? A bit of both, really. Oh, and a cheeky correction. At one point, Doug refers to the game quantum theory, when he really meant quantum break. Sorry for the confusion. Doug's brain has a tendency to move faster than his mouth. But that's part of his charm, isn't it? Now, fair warning, this episode also brushes up against some heavy terrain. Mental health, existential despair, and the reality of suicidal thoughts. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out. In the US, you can call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, anytime. You are not alone, you are needed, and you are loved. All right? Grab your tea, or your tinfoil hat. The Wendibros are about to crack reality wide open.
Hey everyone, this is Doug with the Wendibros. It's surprising that we're back, but we are officially back. It only took a move about 4 hours to come back to my hometown, and we are with Mr. John Fluce tonight.
Hello.
So we have 2 out of 3 Wendibros with us tonight. Mikey could not make it, so he should be on the ones coming out here in the future. I do believe that we're coming back with a bang. This is one that we started out with back in October, and we just never got around to finishing it just due to the fact of moving and everything going crazy. We've been sort of remodeling a house, and John's been busy with his band, who's doing really good. Just had an album release.
Yep. Thank you for bringing that up. That's cool. It's been 12 years in the making, and we're excited to finally get that out there.
Yeah, so check out Strangers When We Meet. So we're going to give them a quick little plug on that. So I'm sure the guys will appreciate that.
Yeah, we do.
So we got some big things coming up, man. It's we're going to be at Saucers over Appalachia here soon. And that's going to be a big festival for us. Our first festival and first, I guess, true outing, and hopefully getting a lot of new fans there, and hopefully a lot of new stories for that as well, too. But Saucers over Appalachia will be happening June 14th from 10 to 5. It is a completely free event. Wendibros are going to be helping to sponsor that. And we just recently moved to Kingsport, started a new business. So I'll give myself a little plug too with Leanne Warren LLC. So if you need any notarizations, private investigation, health insurance consultations, or officiant services, we are your folks for that. And so Leanne Warren is actually partnering with Aliens over Appalachia. So we'll be a big sponsor on that as well too. But Wendibros will have a vendor booth out there, and if you come out there and you tell us your story, guess what? You get a free poster. But it's not free if you don't give it to us. And John's timing it too. So John, it can't be just a 1-minute story.
Yep.
So
we're gonna be strict about it. We want to hear good things.
That's right.
We don't want to hear just any old thing.
I saw a ghost. Can I get a poster? So nothing like that.
Yeah. The posters look great. Doug has done a great job making them. I'm very impressed with them. I think they're beautiful. I think everybody else is going to love them as well. So
yeah, I think they're pretty cool. And I think whenever we get the live on Saucers over Appalachia, we'll be on their social media, and we'll be on their Facebook. So we'll get that out there live, and I'll probably share a sneak peek of what the posters look like. So hopefully that gets you guys hyped. So, John, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, I believe tonight we're going to talk about quantum immortality or quantum suicide, however you want to look at it. I've looked it up, and they kind of seem to be hand in hand, which confused me at first.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, how? And then the more and more I read into it, I was like, oh, okay, well, I see how they're kind of connected. But, when you look up one, it kind of pulls up information for the other.
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned the quantum suicide, because I kept calling it quantum immortality, and I'd forgotten about the quantum suicide aspect of it. So I guess with the idea of quantum immortality and quantum suicide, yeah, they're the same. I guess the only difference is, one, quantum immortality, if you die, you come back in a different timeline. Mm-hmm. Both of them, you come back in a different timeline. But I guess the suicide is, again, trigger warning, and I don't want anybody... This is going to be very heavy subject matter tonight. I know whenever John and I first dug into this, and I think you and I, as compared to Mikey, you and I really took to it, and we really started digging into it. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of like our first, I guess, real case that we kind of got asked to kind of look into for somebody. And I think we got a pretty good story to talk about that. But, there is a content warning to this if you are dealing with depression or suicidal thoughts, or if you have general anxiety or panic disorder. It sent me on a little bit of a spiral whenever I went into it. And first of all, if you are going through that, we would hope that, you're seeking help for that, and that you're going to the necessary hotlines, and we'll try to link all that in there for you too. Yeah. So, but very firm warning on what we're going to be talking about. It is heavy subject matter. We tend to handle a lot of things with humor. I would say, we'll probably have a few laughs tonight, but it's going to be hard to be humorous about this one tonight. But yeah, so quantum immortality, and I was telling John, I use ChatGPT a lot for a few things, and don't worry, it doesn't write our stuff for us. We're 100% authentic on that. But however, it is a great resource for that kind of stuff. So I usually just throw theories at it, and I let it tell me if I'm just insane or if there's any validity to it as well, too. Are widely accepted in the scientific community, even though I will say that there are scientists that have actually tried to look into it, and they can't say, and I guess that goes for a lot of things that are beyond our understanding. They can't confirm whether that's real or not, but it is a really crazy theory in that regard that, that if you and I were to die right now, or to say that we haven't died already, and we're just in different forms right now, talking to, in a parallel universe to that version, and that's when it starts getting a little bit crazy and hazy, and you start thinking, oh fuck,
how many times have I died now?
Yeah, how many times have I died right now? And that messes with me a lot, and I'll go in some personal stuff on my end, maybe towards the end, and I guess where the idea of quantum suicide comes from is that, and again, firm trigger warning on that. I looked into Reddit, and I think John did too, with the theory of quantum suicide. It's that you kill yourself and then you wake up, just like you didn't do it. It's, the instance that you would, I guess, maybe not such a metaphor, but you would pull the trigger in a sense, and you would wake up and you're continuing about your day. And I guess whenever we talked to our guest tonight, she had discussed the idea that if every time you essentially commit suicide, you're kind of going into a lesser version of yourself. So I guess a lot of folks talk about frequencies, and you hear a lot about these days about, vibrational frequencies and raising your vibration. And it's something that I kind of believe in, going to holistic doctors and working with them too is, are you listening to the right kind of music? Are you meditating? And those things kind of touch on a lot of that too, your vibrational frequency. But I guess every time, in the sense of quantum suicide, every time you kill yourself, your vibration is essentially lowering. So you kind of want to elevate and go through the natural process of that. And John was looking through my notes before we went live, and I think he saw one of my theories, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. But it's I thought it was pretty intriguing. But anything you want to add to that, John? Or?
Well, I think just to add to the frequency discussion, I think it's important. Most religions really they strongly discourage and talk against suicide. It's like a really big deal.
That's a good point.
To kill yourself. In most religions, that people you can call it a sin or a travesty or an abomination, whatever you want to call it. But you think it's kind of like the other side of the coin to some of these religions, where enlightenment and Zen and nirvana is what you're striving for, and so to attain that, you have to go one path in life. But if you go this other path and take your life, then it's that lessening of yourself, and you're going away from that kind of perfection that I guess you strive for. Nobody's perfect.
No.
I think basically religion is to help people be good people, to make the world a better place.
It's a good guideline.
A good guideline.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe any religion has it right. That's just my personal beliefs. I think that there are a lot of good things in every religion. So I just think that there's so much unknown that it's really hard to set down one list of rules for any group of anybody. And so I think that's an interesting concept, that maybe, if life is just trying to attain that idea of perfection or the best person we can be, then this kind of a theory really does lend itself to that, because it's like if something happens to you, you get to do over. You get to pretend like it didn't happen. You get to keep going. You may set you back. It may not. You don't know, but it's definitely a very interesting concept that. Yeah, we're gonna get deep about it. I think.
We are, but and it's weird because whenever you were talking about and I'm paraphrasing probably, but you mentioned the concept of I don't know if I believe if any of it has it right or anything,
right?
And it's weird because I'm kind of on like the I agree with you, and I'm also on the other side of the coin because in many ways, and I had this kind of belief ever since I was a kid, and I think growing up in the South, we were all kind of indoctrinated to believe everything is the holy word, everything's Baptist, everything's you do not question God. And I was very different as a child because I did have questions, and I believe in God, but I think I believe in a different concept of what God means. And it's I believe in I think that there's evidence everywhere for that. But I would say where I'm on the flip side of that coin is that I almost believe that somewhere along the lines and if you look at the Quran, you look at the Bible, you look at even Buddhist teachings and texts, they all have such similarities. And, and I was happy to hear that you talk about nirvana and, we talk about heaven, it's all so parallel to each other that to me, it's almost like we all have the same message, but we're kind of bastardizing it a little bit. Yeah. And I think that all those roads will eventually lead to somewhere. And I think the fundamental thing is just to do your best, do good, and it's, as far as suicide goes, that's a gray area. I don't, it's a bad thing that can happen, but it's more sad than, just faulting somebody for something like that, and I think you and I are pretty firm and agreeing on that.
Yes.
I just think that there's certain circumstances that happen that are out of our control. But in a way though, I would say that, if you were to, I suppose, go through the trials of life and you survive that, I would like to think that you either ascend to that next level or your journey is done, so to speak, at that point. And maybe, if suicide were to happen, it's just like, okay, buddy, rough start on that one. Let's take you back here. Maybe you can handle this one. And then you kind of work your way back up those levels. I don't know how much I believe in the idea of a permanent heaven and hell. It's, I don't know if as vast as the universe is and the things that are, I believe that there's miracles everywhere, and I think that everything has presence and energy. And I'm very much a weird hybrid, and especially whenever I talk to people, and this is probably the most open I've been about it, is that I'm probably more, I'm Christian and I'm Buddhist in a sense, and it's and it's funny because I'm trying to build a meditation station in my backyard eventually, and I told Christy, my wife, that we're going to have a Buddha statue or statue of Buddha and a cross out there, So so I'll probably scare the Baptists off from my door,
But you're a Boostian.
A Boostian, Boostian.
Boostianity.
What is it? I'll let that one go. But yeah, it is, man. It's such a deep topic on that too. So essentially, what quantum immortality is saying is that you, me, we're all immortal, so to speak. And then that's kind of a peaceful thought to me, but it's also a very frightening thought that you would have to continue to die and go over the same thing over and over again. We did have a guest that actually got us into this as deep as we did, and we're very grateful for. Her name is Sophie, and she asked that we keep her identity. Don't worry, Sophie is the name that we're using, but she did ask that we keep her identity safe and secret, and there was a lot that came to light in talking to her and then afterwards on that too. And she has given us our blessing to share her story, along with information that at first she was hesitant to share, but did give us her permission on that too. But typically I like to source and link, who we talk to and our guests and everything, but for her protection, we will not be doing any of that. So Sophie, we had an interview with her. We have changed her voice to mask it, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about that after we listen to her story.
I've worked in hotels most of my life since I was about 17, and I went to school for art, actually. I went to the design school in Tampa, and I ended up not really using that degree much, but I do a lot of fluid painting and things like that sort of hobby. I have a little 12 by 12 shop. It's got 3D printers and a laser engraver and all that stuff, vinyl cutters. Well, my husband and I, we were both raised Southern Baptist, and, we still adhere to a lot of the principles, but he's a little bit more old-fashioned than I am. I told him what happened, but anything more than just telling him what happened without really going too deep into what I believe actually occurred, is a little bit too woohoo for him. He's not ready for that yet, and I just don't want to cross that bridge with him. My mom knows what happened, and, it's not a huge secret. It was just a normal night at work, and I had just cooked breakfast as part of my night audit role. So about 4 o'clock, I probably started, getting all this stuff stopped for the kitchen and everything. So I started cooking about 5, and I was walking back from the kitchen across the hotel lobby to the back office, where we kept some stuff, some of the supplies in the storeroom. And when I walked past, I always looked out the front door to make sure nobody was out there. We kept it locked at night, in case they had pulled up. I had to check him against the hotel. So when I glanced up, I saw this guy coming across the parking lot towards the entrance of the hotel, and he looked like a big guy. He was wearing all black. He looked like a hoodie and kind of like a cargo pants, I guess you could say, and they were black with boots on, and it looked like an assault rifle. And he was walking towards me holding it. And then I seen it, and it was he was firing it at me after a second. And it's like my feet were glued to the floor in the lobby. I couldn't move. I had a cell phone in one hand and the cordless phone in the other hand. I couldn't use phones. I couldn't do anything. But I didn't see any glass shatter. I didn't see anything that you would think would normally happen. If somebody was shooting you through glass doors, but then after a second, it all just went away. He was gone just as quickly as he was here. And I wanted to fall to my knees right there, but I just somehow managed to keep walking. And I walked back to the storeroom, and I kind of just went to the bathroom. I was like, oh my God, what happened? It wasn't like a bright flash or anything, but I seen kind of white. And then I seen it moving. It would jerk, he was firing at me. I didn't see a big, huge flash. I seen it. It looked more just white, almost like smoke, I guess you could say. I don't know. I've never seen one break. When guests hit the doors with their luggage or anything, it's nothing ever happened. Even when I walked through the parking lot on the way home, I even glanced around are there casings on the ground? And there was no evidence anywhere of anything that I could see. I thought I was going crazy. I didn't have any access to the cameras. Our boss, who was Indian, and he lived in Alabama. He came down about once a week and gave us supplies but But other than that, we just worked there. We kind of handled it all on our own, so I could never access any cameras for anything. I didn't dare call him and tell him what I thought had happened, because he would have thought I was completely nuts too. It was just me, and I had guests that were staying with pretty close in the first floor, but nobody complained about noise. Nobody mentioned anything weird. He was bald, 6 feet. I'm 5 feet, 5 feet 4, and he was quite a little bit taller than me, I would say. He was about where our awning started for the hotel, so it was one that you drive under, and I was like maybe 10 feet into the door. So I'd say maybe 30 feet and give or take. I'm not completely sure. Just like he was just snapped. He was just gone in an instant. I kept telling my friend for a couple of weeks before that I had this just like kind of like impending doom feeling. I get little like weird feelings about stuff sometimes. I don't know exactly. I can never put my finger on what it was. I was just completely clueless. I'm like, what is going to happen? And I couldn't figure it out. And lo and behold, it's like for a while until I figured out what this actually was, I was kind of angry because it's like my husband was a little bit different. Like just certain things were just a little bit different. Like one of my friends like swears up and down that I used to do a job doing inventory for stores with her and I've never done store inventories with her. And then my husband like will disagree on things like that happened or didn't happen, and it's just like just little things that is really strange. Well, I've always been raised a, Southern Baptist, but I never really like resonated with that a whole lot. Like I always believed what I was told to believe as a kid, kind of blindly. I've always had my questions, and then when this happened, it's kind of led to more questions than answers, and things just don't really seem to line up. And I guess going into that, you had mentioned something about what you believe might be almost like a spiritual awakening ever since COVID. And I guess that's what I was going to lean into about, your beliefs, and it seems like they all have their different parts about what they believe in things, but they all seem to be in agreement about that one thing like that. There's an awakening happening and it's supposed to, I guess, begin before the end of the year. Um and that's why I can't like the religion that we were raised in. It just doesn't sit well with me any longer because like I listen to all these near death experience survivors, and it seems like every single one of them, like their stories all align in one way or another. Like a lot of them say that they think that what you experience when you die is what you believe is going to happen. Like Buddhists are going to see Buddha, Christians are going to see Jesus. It's your reality. Yeah. And I don't know, there's just so much that like falls in line with one thing after the next. It's hard to not believe it when it comes from so many different people. It's the aftermath wasn't quite as bad. Like I was kind of freaked out for a few days, but once I talked to a couple people in on Reddit actually and learned what this was and learned about the concept of quantum and morality, it was kind of like the next few days after that, I'd been punched in the gut, like to actually realize the reality of what happened. And to me, it was unbelievable. It's absolutely flooring to think about it. And I mean, just I don't know. Are my kids in another timeline without their mom, or did that timeline stop? Like, and then what happened to the me that was here in this timeline before I ended up here? Those are things we don't have the answers to, and we don't know what happened. Yeah, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things that were going on at the hotel that I think were maybe the reason that this happened, but it's not like anything with quantum immortality. It's more linked to, I guess you could say, extracurricular activities that were occurring there. One of the housekeepers is a psychic, and she's kind of had some visions about a girl getting hurt upstairs, but nothing that was related to quantum immorality. Well, I'm starting to come to peace with it. And I found a couple communities where people have been sharing a lot of information about, having it happen to them and being able to have a community where you can talk about it with other people that have experienced the same type of things. It really helps you kind of come to terms with it and get used to it. And you don't feel like the crazy one that needs to be in a padded cell anymore. It's just, I guess it's just something I have to get used to. I don't really have a choice. Life moves on, and there's a couple different groups on Reddit. One is the NDE group, and then I just joined another one last night. I think it's actually called Quantum Immortality. And then there's also a Facebook group. I think that's the one I found you in. It's a glitch in the matrix. That's where the idea was first introduced to me at. I'm not really sure. I haven't read where somebody thought that somehow that there's an end result that we're supposed to be at, and that all of these different timelines have been reduced down into different ones, and they're trying to get us to where we're supposed to be at for humanity. And it's just kind of weird to think of it like that. Like, the one that gives me the most is the Statue of Liberty. I remember being taught in school that it was on Ellis Island, and I never liked Liberty Island. I've never heard of it. And so I started reading about the Mandela effect. Well, I was reading some posts last night, and they were talking about how just because of the concept is not an excuse to act recklessly. And I think there's a post that's actually pinned about that. And then there's a couple other posts where people are talking about, oh, well, like, there's one guy, he's like, I killed myself. And every time I come back worse. And he's talking about how his circumstances get worse every single time that he commits suicide. And the answer that he pretty much got from the community was, well, that's because you're dying from your own suicide. And the only way it's going to get better is if you die naturally. Psychics and mediums and things that I've been listening to, a lot of them say that the veil is thinning for the earth, and that, we're closer to other, I guess, realms or whatever it is of existence, and their planes of existence. And I think part of the shift in humanity is supposed to be to the next dimension where there are, I guess, more beings. And I don't know if that's like ghostly beings or just spiritual beings or whatever it is, but I guess we're supposed to get to a point in our evolution as humans to where we're able to see them or interact with them more. And maybe that would put some people at peace with their hauntings to where they could actually interact with whatever is haunting them. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I definitely believe that there's something going on. I feel some kind of change occurring. Like, it is said that it's supposed to have something to do with all the solar flares. I have no idea if that's actually true or not. Yeah, but it's just an interesting concept, and I like to listen to it and keep an open mind about it, and just see where it takes us. I mean, I think that there's some kind of weird spiritual shift going on for sure. And I don't know, and you couldn't ask me to explain it because I don't know, but I guess I can feel something inside that there's something weird going on. I can remember, I can't tell you a time, and yeah, well, I have started to listen to a doctor, Stephen Greer, and this might upset some people, but I was reading what he was saying one night and like looking on his website and stuff, and it just kind of like hit me that the things he was saying kind of line up with what the Bible says about the Antichrist. I think that what we were made to believe was very misconstrued. And I've actually been reading a lot about the Gospel of Paul, or the teachings of Paul, and versus the teachings of James, and kind of been opening my mind up to maybe the fact that Paul wasn't who we think he is, and maybe what we're experiencing does line up with some of the actual teachings of Jesus and of James and more of the New Testament type of things. I think that there's definitely a growth process in a lot of this. If we were to come back, I would assume that it would be for a good reason, and I can't think of his. And as humans, it's a built-in desire for us to find our purpose and to find our reason here. And I don't think we would have that drive or that desire that's so intense at times if we didn't truly have a purpose. I would just say you're not alone. Whatever you're struggling with, there's always people that are going through similar things. And you'll find your tribe if you keep looking for them.
So after hearing that from Sophie, she contacted us, and she believed that she was essentially shot and killed one night during her shift at a hotel. And it's, and if you listen to it a little more in depth, you can see that she had a lot of, and I think that's where this is, where we got so invested in it too, is that it kind of makes you question a lot of things too. She was raised, again, very conservative Christian upbringing.
Yep.
And her husband, I know, stated that he didn't even really want to discuss it with her, that it was out of the question. She's trying to get him kind of moved over to that stuff. But she firmly believes that, she was shot and killed that night by somebody carrying an MP5. And I know John had to look up what an MP5 was.
Yeah, I didn't even know what it was.
I didn't either, but I guess it's it's a automatic pistol
or submachine gun is what it was described as, or an automatic weapon. It looks, very small AK, I guess, is kind of what it looks like.
Yeah.
It's a small automatic assault weapon.
Yeah. And for Sophie, she really kind of started questioning a lot of things. Like, she believes firmly that she did die that night,
Right.
and she said that she dealt with a lot of trauma after that. And
Mhm.
even going down in a few, and I guess this is where it really intrigued me, is that she was so distraught about it that even after she was still alive in this timeline, she was so distraught in the fact that she died in the other timeline that she thought, well, what happened to my kids and my husband in that alternate
Right.
timeline?
Yeah.
And what are they doing? And it's, and it's very, I don't know if bittersweet's the right word for something like that, because it's not like it's really out of your control. You figured if you made it to the other side, you should be jumping and cheering. But,
Yeah.
I suppose you have that maternal, paternal instinct that,
Yeah.
you really want to make sure that your family's taken care of too,
Hmm.
despite, in that timeline, it's done and over.
Yeah.
So she ended up going to Reddit to try to get some validation on what she had experienced, because she really, I mean, she felt alone in a lot of what had happened, because again, her upbringing, she didn't know anything about that. She wasn't really,
No.
into the supernatural up until this. And, so she did send us some Reddit links to look at. And I think John's going to read one of those for us as well, too.
So this person here says they have an experience they'd like to share up until they came across some posts in the sub that they'd always tried to think of their experience as a dream. It always felt like more, though. And it's really hard to explain, but back in 2011 or 2012, this person was a teenager. It was midsummer, and I was at a gas station with my mom around 11 p.m., and I was getting a chocolate milk out of the fridge. My mom was already at the counter waiting to check out. As I'm walking up, a guy burst through the doors waving a gun. He pointed at the cashier first, demanded money, and then he turned it on my mom and demanded money from her too. I moved her back and stepped between him and my mom. He said he would shoot her if she didn't give him money. And I remember saying, "If you shoot anyone, shoot me." The next thing I know, I hear a boom, followed by the most intense and searing pain in my head I have ever felt. I was falling, everything going black, and then I woke up. The problem is, I woke up and it was midwinter, and I was in a place I had never been. I woke up on the floor of a bedroom I didn't recognize, in an apartment I had never seen. My head still hurt just ever so slightly for about 10 seconds after I woke, and then it was gone. I realized I was on a little makeshift bed like I had slept on the floor. So I leave the room and I go into the living room. I recognize two of the guys there. They're my friends. I've known them for 2 years at least. But the other three guys I had never seen in my life. I can't even remember their names now. So I'm confused now, right? And I quickly learned that we had all planned to go snowboarding that day. All my stuff is by the front door ready to go, and this apartment was the closest to the mountain. So we had stayed the night, but I swear I have no memory of going there. I have no idea who those guys were. I didn't recognize the area I was in. I was unfamiliar with the city I was in. I was in the right state, not super far from home. So I went snowboarding. I remember the day feeling off. I felt weird the whole time. When I got home later that night, I was relieved to see my house was the same and my family was the same. I was shocked, however, because other rather big things were different. I had apparently stopped playing sports at the high school, which I don't remember quitting. I loved playing sports and running, and I was failing every class. And the weirdest one, I had a girlfriend. That was so weird because I knew who she was, but I had never really talked to her, let alone asked her out. So breaking up with someone who you barely know is weird. I've always told myself that everything prior to that weird gunshot dream was just that, a dream, but I don't know. I've seen so many posts here about different experiences. I thought I'd share mine and see what you all think. So,
That's, and that's not completely unlike what Sophie went through, because I remember her saying that she she saw the muzzle of the gun go off, and
mm-hmm,
then she heard the glass breaking.
mm-hmm,
And then what she said, whenever she got back, there was like little things that had happened that just weren't aligning. Like she could firmly remember certain anniversary days or important days,
mm-hmm,
about things that had happened that her and her husband would disagree on, and that she had worked with in a retail market doing, I believe, inventory with somebody, and she was like, Doug, I've never worked with this person. I've never done inventory a day in my life. I don't recall that ever happening. And that's such a mind fuck to think about.
Yeah.
And again, part of my language,
is.
everyone, but to think about, you have another life, and then somehow, and you would think that quantum immortality would almost be like a perfect process. Like you would just phase out of one, go into another,
Mm-hmm.
and you just sync up with that. But it's almost like there's like an upload problem, or maybe it's like a delayed upload, or, but I guess if you start going into like things like deja vu, like, man,
Yeah.
I've done this before, I know what's going to happen, or
Yeah, that's an interesting
way
to link that in.
do you ever have those dreams, like whenever, I don't know, like, if a lot of people have these, but like sometimes like I'll have a dream, and then down the road, and it could be like something like I went to the store and I ran into somebody in that dream,
Mm-hmm.
and down the road, and I guess if you want to go into probability, yeah, that's probably going to happen, but I would have it like, pretty frequently, and then like, I would be somewhere and I'd be like, oh, wait a minute, I dreamt about this exact moment. Have you ever had anything like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had plenty of things.
I guess
like
premonitions.
That. Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I've done that before. Something else that's happened to me is I've had dreams of having experiences with some people that I knew, and like this person, like people they didn't know, and I've like, everybody says that there's some dreams that just feel so real. Well, it was like it was almost like I was in another life. There's been some talk where people think that, well, maybe one life is a dream and the other one's real, or maybe they're both real. Maybe you jump into a different life when you dream. You go into a different state of consciousness, and I've had dreams like that before.
Oh yeah.
And so, building on that, those premonitions, there's all kinds of different strange dreams that I've had that.
And I don't know if it's like you get your wires crossed or something like that, but it's, I even get those dreams where like they're just so realistic, but it's almost like a life that you would want, to where you don't even want to wake up from that certain dream, and that's the ones that really suck, because you're like, man, put me back in.
Yeah, I want to go back.
Everything was right there. It's that's an interesting theory too that I didn't really think about, but I mean, could it be, whenever we get to like, I guess, I don't know if it would be REM sleep. I'd have to do a little more digging and something like that. But like maybe we are kind of, your body kind of goes into automatic mode whenever you sleep. Like you're on automatic breathing. You're just kind of there. Your brain is shut down, so to speak. But could you be phasing into a different reality? And I've had fantastical dreams that feel just like you and I sitting here right now, that would defy the laws of physics and logic, but they were very real in that moment. So I don't know. It's a strange aspect, and screw with your head so much, kind of like that story that you just read about that guy, but at the same time, I guess it can give you like a sense of peace, because the ones that we've, not to go heavy, but the ones that we have loved and lost, that they could still be out there. And that's always to me, that kind of gives me a little bit of peace. And I think you've heard me talk about it before, like the Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. That book really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And it's, I wouldn't say that he's some profound, second coming type or anything like that, even though a lot of people probably would lead you to believe something like that. But he takes a lot of faith-based texts and religious texts all across the spectrum. And then he also puts science with it too. And, and he talks about the universe being infinite and how it speaks on that in the Bible, and how Albert Einstein talked about that as well too. But there was a certain part in it that after my dad passed away, and I'm still, depressed about my father passing away, but the one thing that really resonated with me in that book was that there's no such thing as, the past or the future. There's only the now. Like you're only in the present. Like we're not in the future. We're not in the past. We are strictly in the present. And so that if someone you love died, you knew that they were here, you knew that they were always around, but they never stopped being here. Like just because they're not with you physically right now, you're still in the present. That means in your present state, they were already here.
Yeah.
It's just in a different capacity at that point. And, and again, I'm butchering that analogy,
No.
but it resonated with me a lot and brought me a lot of peace in that too. And that's kind of like what the egg theory is. And so, the egg theory, it's kind of a long story. I would encourage a lot of folks to like look up the egg theory, but essentially paraphrasing, like, what is the egg theory? It's a short story by Andy Weir, the author of The Martian. It's not a scientific theory, more of a thought experiment or a philosophical idea, which not completely unlike, quantum immortality or quantum suicide. But the big premise is, imagine that if you die, after death, you meet God or some higher being, and that being tells you something crazy like, you were every person who has ever lived and will ever live. And I kind of, told you that the other night, that I kind of believe that, and again, I can go on this for forever. But I am you, you were me, and, Christy sitting across from us was, that's us too. I think that there's a certain, I don't like a shared energy between everybody, and I think that we are all part of some bigger picture, but we're just different eyes for it, so to speak.
Right.
And then again, I probably sound crazy saying all that.
No,
but
I think that, you say we're all part of the same energy. I think that's ultimately kind of what most religions seem to say, is that, we're, they say we're made in God's image. And
that's a good point.
And when you think about energy, what really is energy? And we keep coming back or talking about frequencies, and you've got a wide spectrum of frequencies. And so maybe if you think of the entire spectrum as being maybe kind of in quotations, God, being everything, they say he's the Alpha and Omega, he's everything. So if you think of that from an energy perspective, is if God is the entire spectrum, and we all have our different energy signatures. We all kind of think and on different frequency levels and operate at different things. That's why some people, I think, like different kinds of music, or you want to work in a quiet environment versus you need background noise, stuff like that. And I think that's another kind of piece in that puzzle, so to speak, is that, if it does kind of lend that we may be at different frequencies, but that doesn't mean that we're not made up of the same energy and maybe the same consciousness.
Well, even if you're to break it down like a molecular level, when we die and we decompose, our body decomposes, but that energy still remains, and it kind of makes you think, like, where does it go? And I guess if you really wanted to break down, because, quantum immortality and quantum suicide, those are probably bigger words for what, I say a lot of people are thinking is reincarnation.
Yeah.
I would think reincarnation would probably be I don't think that would be out of the realm of probability. I wouldn't put it past the mysteries of the world and the universe to have us, as, like you said, beings of energy with a shared energy. Eventually that energy floats around and says, okay, this is my next trip, my next vessel, that's what I go into. It could very well be a big recycling plant.
It could be.
It could be.
And they've proven scientifically that thought has mass.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to really deep dive into what souls are or consciousness is, but I think that thought has some prevalence in that. You have to have thought in order. I think most people, if you say something has a soul, then it has to have that kind of thought, that reasoning. And, matter can neither be created nor destroyed. It's only changed.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, where does that energy go when you die? That your consciousness, the weight of your thoughts and things, where does that stuff go?
Absolutely.
It can't, it's not destroyed, and it's not created when you're born. It's got to be changed. So where does that come from?
Yeah.
If not, I think it's a good point to, if, reincarnation might be possible or probable. Who knows?
Plausible.
Plausible. I think it's. I think it's plausible.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept. And I was talking to somebody not long ago, and back in the day, I wouldn't have considered myself like a godly person or a religious person. And And I think a lot of that changed, all my years away, on what, and I think that there was little miracles here and there that kind of made me start thinking a little bit like maybe everything isn't so coincidental, and maybe it is very coincidental, but there might be a bigger reason for why it was so coincidental.
Mm-hmm.
But I had somebody bring the question up to me, like, whenever we get to heaven, let's just, because that's what they brought up, whenever you get to heaven, you meet God, and God judges you and brings in like your past, and you observe it. They asked what my thoughts were on that, because again, I'm very different the way I think. I follow a lot of the principles of, the Bible, and that resonated with me, and Buddhism resonated a lot with me too, and a lot of Tibetan and Buddhist texts, and the answer I gave them, they kind of were like, I don't like what you're saying, but it kind of makes sense.
Right.
But it was essentially the way I told them. I said, well, yeah, I said, I think that you're kind of on the right path. And again, I don't claim to be enlightened or anything. I'm certainly not enlightened. Like, I'm not
Right.
at all. But what I told them was that I believe that in that concept, and that's what kind of reminded me of it. You said that, if we're all made in the same image of God, I believe that whenever you die, you're going to get up there and you're going to meet yourself in some form.
Right.
I believe that God will be us to an extent. And if we're all in God's image, I think that's what we're going to look like whenever we get there. And that's kind of what the egg theory explains, that you're going to get up there. You're going to meet somebody. And I think that somebody's going to look like you. I don't think God in that essence is going to judge you so much as you're going to judge yourself.
Right.
And I think that you're going to look at yourself, not on like a mirror, and say, you know what? I did my best. I tried, and I feel like I did okay.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's out of the, there's nothing within the realm of possibility in what we're talking about, but I don't think it's out of the realm of what we're talking about. I think that if we were to get up there, we would meet ourselves, and then I think that would be the ultimate judgment, is if we like what we see.
Right.
And there could be some ugly truths to that, where we come back and we're like, man, I really screwed that up.
That's a lot more palatable,
Mm-hmm.
I believe, than what because I was taught that as well growing up in Baptist
Mm-hmm.
churches around here, is that when you better be good, because when you die, you're going to go up there and God's going to judge you, and you're going to watch your whole life from beginning to end. And like, to me, that's insane. Like,
no, I agree with you completely.
I think, just personally, from what I've seen in the churches I grew up in, I'm not saying all churches are the same, all people of one religion are the same. That's not true at all. But I think that there was a lot of scare tactics used in some churches.
Amen, brother.
I think that I just think that it, I think that what I've read from the Bible is if you want to rule with love,
Mm-hmm.
not fear.
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of churches do that sometimes, and they may not be any, malice behind it truly. They may just be trying to make people act correctly. But I mean, there's billions of people in the world.
We're going to condemn every single one of them, or the most, we're going to condemn the majority of the world for not subscribing to this small percentage.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And if you think everybody's going to get judged, and there's a billion people or more, I don't know how many there are. I know there's a lot. But if the average age is 50 years, and that's just being very conservative based on life expectancies from other, third world countries. But how long is it going to take to watch a billion people's lives from start to finish? Like, I don't think that it's going to, I don't think that it's legitimately.
I appreciate you elaborating on that, because, I mean, I didn't even think about that whenever I was telling you what I just said, I mean, and I think, and it's funny that you mentioned that, like, would God watch all their lives and be like, and if we are created in his image, I think that, and again, this could be taboo to say, I think that we are created with flaws too. I think when people say, why did God let something like this happen? Like, why did this, that's a man-made thing, we are capable of great evils in the world.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what God does. I think that, we are creators not even to an extent, we are creators in our own ways, and so I would, and I'm glad you said that, I would say once we get up there, we're probably going to have to face ourselves. And,
Yeah.
And that really, you think about anybody, and I've always been my greatest enemy. I've always been my greatest enemy.
Yep. Me too.
I'm my biggest critic, and I'm the quickest one to scrutinize everything about me too.
Mhm.
But I think, and if anybody does listen to this, I'd hope that you, and I think John touched on it. We live in such a fear-based religion type of world, and it's not just Christianity. There's a lot of faiths out there that do push that idea of, we have to rule by fear, and that's just, and I always tell my wife, like, I don't think a lot of these pastors actually read the Bible, because the Bible that I read does not correlate a lot with what their teachings are, and I always say, like, going to a Baptist church or a Baptist revival is probably the most metal thing you'll go to, because all they're doing is screaming about Satan and hell.
Yeah.
It's
That's funny.
But that's, even in that regard, though, that's a very small portion of what the Bible teaches, and I think, and again, this isn't to sway anybody. I think that when people say, I'm an atheist and I hate God and this and that, I don't think that's what you're really saying. I think what you're saying is I hate organized religion, which is, typically the culprit behind a lot of that belief. And I don't blame you. I don't blame you for feeling that way.
No. I think that whole idea of your life flashing before your eyes when you die, I think has been kind of extrapolated and used, like you said, as a fear tactic. But it is interesting. So this idea of, whenever you die, you jump over into a different alternate version. So when does that end? Because
it's so funny, though, because I was getting ready to ask you the same thing. And I thought that's, because I was waiting for you to end. So I was like, well, when does that end? And
right.
Well, so, John was looking over some chicken scratch notes of mine, from back in November, and I've been renovating an office right now, and I found that stuff today, and this is a weird story, but I actually didn't know where these papers were today until the wind blew them out from a stack of papers that I had.
Oh, wow.
And it was the specific topic that we had tonight, which was quantum immortality, which another thing is everything comes in twos, which is a really weird concept that my wife got me onto. But she's like, if you are on the right path and if you're at the right vibrational frequency, everything will come in twos. And if you really start paying attention to that, it's wild, because everything really does come in twos. It's a strange thing. It happened. This is so weird, and I'll get to your question.
No.
But just last night we were watching. I bought the Twin Peaks box set because I'd never seen the entire series. Right. And Christy and I, this is such a silly story, but we were thinking about hot dogs, specifically from Lazy J's farm, which is a great butcher shop, by the way. But they make their own Chicago dogs there. It's the best hot dog you ever put in your mouth. But so we were craving them, so we went to Lazy J's, got some hot dogs, which is not something that we typically put in our diet. But we were like, we could not shut up about hot dogs, and then we were watching Twin Peaks, and sure enough, that episode started talking about hot dogs.
Really?
And we were like, "What the hell? Like, is going on?" It's like the universe. And I don't, it's so weird how you have these little coincidences, not coincidence. And that's just a funny story. I don't think there's any deeper meaning to that, but it is weird that we were craving hot dogs, made hot dogs, and we watched an episode of Twin Peaks randomly, and a big subject of it was about hot dogs.
Yeah, I think that does crop up. If anybody wants to be honest, I'm sure that everybody that something similar like that has happened. It's like when you get a song stuck in your head, and you go out and you go driving somewhere and you turn on the car and it's playing on the radio. Like sometimes that stuff happens, and it's weird.
And you're thinking about it. Like you don't have to say it. You're thinking about it, and then it pops up. So to kind of go into your question, I don't know when it ends, but I have a general theory. And so, John was looking over my notes because I was tossing ideas at ChatGPT, and I was playing Alan Wake 2 at that time. And then one thing Alan Wake 2 touched on was the concept of spirals. And I got really big on like a Remedy Kick, who were like the developers of that game. And they also had a game called Quantum Theory. And then Quantum quantum theory, there's a chalkboard on there in the college level, and it mentions quantum immortality. It talks about Alan Wake. Well, in Alan Wake 2, they talk about how nothing is in a line, it's in a spiral. And so I threw that concept at ChatGPT whenever John and I were really researching this. And I said, could quantum immortality be a representation of spirals? And, ChatGPT said, yeah, now you're on it. Like, that's the right way of thinking about it. I'm like, well, how the hell do you know this? Like, it's,
Right.
but, and again, it collects all the information across the internet, but, it kind of gives you very intelligent answers. So I started thinking about spirals, specifically double helix. So
Right.
double helix DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to see here if I have that on my notes of, so you have 92 strands of DNA.
Okay.
And that's, and John, I don't know if you want to go ahead and touch on it whenever you're reading about it tonight before I start going into it. Because I know you were looking at that.
Oh, yeah. So just my thoughts on what you had like, drawn up. So what I kind of gathered from what you were drawing and marking up is that, like, if your life is like one leg of that helix, that double helix, and you've got all these ladder rungs, so to speak, that's what they talked about in school. It looks like a ladder that's been twisted. So, but so like when maybe each place where the DNA, crosses over, maybe that's one of those nexus points or one of those just events, those crazy events that happens, and that's when your consciousness can pass over to another one. And so then I guess the idea behind the theory is that the rest of that helix that you jumped from would be gone. So it's got to get replaced. If you're gonna be able to keep doing it, then it's gonna have to be replaced. So I thought that was interesting. And is that what you were thinking?
And I'm glad you're my friend.
Yeah.
So it's but no, that's exactly what I was thinking on that. So I got so crazy with it, and that's whenever my wife came in. I was in the office, and I said, Christy, I think I figured this out, and she was like, no, like, just come to bed, and it was late, because I know you and I spiraled a little bit with it, but it really got us thinking about big picture stuff. But the double helix and with the 92 strands of DNA, I was almost wondering if you're and again, I'm just branching off of what you're saying. I'm wondering, if we talk about ascension and then descension, say if we do have quantum suicide, do we go back down that ladder, or do we go up that ladder of DNA? Right. If you were to, and I know you all can't see it right now, but it's if you were to basically be X on here as in dead, do you go to this alternate timeline on that same strand, and then that's your safety net? And then whenever you die, do you go to the next strand? And then that's kind of where I was going with it. Again, that's not science, but it just, right. To me, it was kind of like too coincidental,
right?
Which is what we've been talking a lot about tonight. You also have to consider with DNA, you have the imprint. You have all your ancestors within your DNA. You are a genetic makeup of the people that came before you. There's nothing, and it's so crazy, because you'll read, or like you'll see videos out there. And there's one in particular that's popping in my mind, but it was this new mother with her daughter, and her daughter started reciting things about her great grandmother. That she had never met before, and the mom very firmly believed that her daughter may have been her great grandmother, essentially stepping into that next phase,
right,
but there's also, hey, who's to say that, your genetic makeup may not be so strong from somebody who's deceased in your timeline, in your DNA strand, that you do have, and I think that they have talked about that, about genetic makeups, having memories and stuff too.
Yeah.
Who's to say you wouldn't remember something like that?
Right.
It's a crazy concept. I don't know. There could be something to DNA, and that could explain if there was ever a confirmation of quantum immortality or anything like that. that could very well be the link to it too.
Could be. Yeah.
But yeah, that's my scientific spiel on.
I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. And I'm trying to read my chicken scratch on here, but it was pretty rapid fire. DNA, double helix, does it equate to a spiral? DNA strands, branches, do the branches, and that's one thing I talked about. ChatGPT could, and I said, let's think about it in the realm of video games, because I like video games. I said, could life be a choose your own adventure video game? Where if I make A choice, this happens, B choice, that happens. Mm-hmm. If I die in this one, can I hit continue and start on that one? And then we just kind of continue the level. That's probably more of or an easier way to kind of think about that.
It is.
So is DNA the code to our video game?
It might be.
I don't know. Anything you want to elaborate or?
We've kind of we've learned about two different people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the one from Reddit and then Sophie's story. I think it's interesting that with Sophie's story, it's almost like when that shift happened, that shift from one reality to another. It's like everything was the same except for she said that there were little things here and there, but then the other person on Reddit, it was like a huge difference.
Shift.
Their home was the same, but they had a significant other. There were friends in their lives that they had never met before. So like these other realities, are they? Are some of them very similar to us, or are they, this whole mess of different decisions that you make throughout lives? You have all these different branching paths, and like, when you go over to a new one, is it because, you don't have any more choices from before, like that are similar?
Yeah.
Or is it just random? Or I'm thinking about that.
It's weird. What if you do get a catalyst that wasn't supposed to happen? It's that you just get that one-off thing. Like death could be preordained, but then there could be I guess, as cliche as it sounds, a glitch in the matrix.
Right.
A glitch in the matrix. That would they say, okay, because that guy, yeah, you're right. I mean, he had such a shift that he was like, wait a minute, like I like sports and. Yeah. I didn't have a girlfriend and I'm failing and I was really good at that. Mm-hmm. Was he actually supposed to die that day? Or was it supposed to be his mother? And then he kind of screwed the whole thing up for him. Right. With Sophie, maybe she was meant to go that way. Mm-hmm. And then her life worked out with no big bang, so to speak.
Right.
I think the other thing that it brings up too is, and I think you and I kind of talked about it, and I think we both kind of believe in the theory of parallel dimensions. Mm-hmm. Could parallel dimensions just be different phases where, we are, maybe it's less science fiction to where we don't have, gray aliens coming out of the phases or anything like that. Maybe it's just us, it's mm-hmm. just us in different timelines and worlds. I know in the egg theory, then the part of the story, it talks about, excuse me, talks about, you were a car salesman who died in a car crash and your wife never loved you and this and that. But in your next life, you're going to be an Asian girl 300 years in the past. And they're going to say, well, how did that work? And, in the egg theory, it's a really cool story to read. But it's, they say, well, because there's always the present, it's all just moving at the same timeline. So, that would be kind of incredible to think about too, because the way, whenever you read that story, it also made me think that not only did he shift his life so much, but it almost sounded like he kind of shifted a timeline there too.
Right.
Because, he was a teenage boy and then suddenly he was on his own and,
but I think it was midsummer and went to midwinter. So like a 6 month kind of estimated gap.
Yeah.
So you had kind of mentioned, a booting process, like a computer. Like, does it take some time to shift your consciousness?
Oh yeah.
And it could, or it could just be that the one you shifted into was just maybe your parents had you later in life.
Yeah.
Or, you're the same person. It's just that your parents waited to, the condom didn't break, or just to be silly about it. But it doesn't mean that it's not the same person. But yeah, it's curious about what could cause a jump like that.
Mm-hmm. I want to apologize to anybody listening during John's really good point. We live in the South, and those were probably gunshots going off.
Or fireworks.
Memorial Day.
It is Memorial Day.
Yeah, there's a firing range right behind the house. Yeah, so
it could be both.
It could be both here. So I'm pretty sure somebody just entered into an alternate timeline over there.
Oh yeah.
So I will say, and unless John has anything, big to wrap up for quantum immortality, again, there's no way to really explain it. I'll link what, I'll do a scan of my findings and everything that I've done with the data on that. Again, the data is, rudimentary at best because there's no real data for it.
Right.
I think John's done a few things too. We're going to end this, but before we end it, I will say that Sophie gave us a follow-up. And if you listen to her interview, and I know this has been kind of a lengthy episode, and who knows, we may have split it into a two-parter after this. I'm not sure, but she did give us a follow-up. If you'd noticed, she was certainly kind of vague, and she was very cautious about keeping her identity protected. And she did send us a follow-up and gave us her blessing to share the remainder of her story, along with a little more supernatural happenings on there as well. So Sophie wrote back to me, "I apologize for being vague about the experience at the hotel. I'll explain, but I am hesitant to share because it does sound unbelievable. However, I assure you it's true. My job was extremely hazardous due to trafficking activities." So again, the plot thickens on that. And I think before she even mentioned that, I think whenever I was talking to John and Mikey in our private chat lines, and again, very private chat lines, just to make sure that, we do kind of keep these stories secure, I kind of alluded to something in that regards back then, to possible human trafficking, which it did confirm my suspicion on that. Unfortunately, this wasn't my first encounter with such incidences. I think I said that wrong. Incidents. I initially tried to ignore it, but after witnessing too much, I realized that I had become a liability. Honestly, I'm not seeking to expose anyone, as it's a massive issue with deep connections that would put me at risk. This is why I'm also keeping my identity hidden, as I'm unsure of the perpetrator's capabilities, or what my perpetrator's capabilities are in this reality. This wasn't my first encounter. In 2017, a trafficking ring was busted at a Motel 6 in Destin, Florida, where I worked as a night auditor. After the raid, a regular guest showed me Facebook messages from the suspects asking about me, indicating that I'd been noticed. Working the front desk overnight, especially in corrupt areas, had become perilous. I truly believe it's why this whole incident occurred. I'm sure you had to be curious as to why someone would come after me out of all of this execution style. Now you know. I should have been more upfront on it. I do applaud her bravery, in coming forward and trying to tell us about that too. And and obviously if you see something, say something, especially when it comes to something like, human trafficking. But Sophie did confirm that she believed that she was targeted because of, I guess, her exposure to possible human trafficking in her career, and which kind of gave a little bit more weight to what happened during that night when she was possibly shot and killed, if that were to actually happen, and we're going to we're going to go out on a limb here and believe what she says on that. I can tell you, talking to Sophie, and I did talk to her one-on-one, over a video call. She seemed genuinely authentic. She did not seem like she was trying to sensationalize anything. She made it very clear that she did not want to do that. And I think the Wendibros stance is that we don't want to do that either. We joke a little bit, and we try to have fun, but we also handle a lot of things, I think, with respect, especially to the person, so, but if that is the case, that definitely puts a much dark turn on that.
Yeah.
She did come back to us a little bit later in the future, talking about something possibly being outside of a friend's house, and we'll try to link that video and try to get that on there too. And it does not show her location or anything like that, and it would be hard to, kind of make that up. But it looked like a dark figure outside of her friend's house on video. And I asked her if she could send me any more footage. She agreed to do that, but I never received the footage, unfortunately. And hopefully Sophie's okay. I plan on, whenever we release this episode, following up with her. She's kind of gone a little bit radio silent on me, and we're hoping that, she's safe. And if there's anything that the Wendibros can do, even if we have to, go through legal means to make sure she stays protected, that's absolutely something that we'll do too. And if she listens to this, Sophie, we got your back, and we'll take care of you however we can. So on that video, I will say this much. She sent a video asking if we'd be interested in looking at it. At first, I did not see anything on the video until my wife pointed out to me, and I think John eventually saw it, but it was a dark figure. It was a very rainy night. I know that sounds like the setup of a horror movie, but I guess that's all this is at this point. But you can kind of make out a dark figure with a white face. This neighborhood is small and mostly woods. I grew up across the street where my folks live, and the neighbor two houses down grew up here as well. There's a 12-year age difference between us, so we didn't attend school together. His brother had caused problems between our families years ago, so we had never met or spoken to each other until recently. A mutual friend forced us to talk, and we have become good friends since then. We helped each other out on our properties. He has major heart problems, and now he's in the ICU. It's not looking good for him. When you responded, I had just been informed of the situation. His situation may be the reason for why the dark figure visited me that night. At the exact time I saw the figure, my neighbor was not home. We had spoken on the phone just beforehand. Since he had spent time around my house frequently, this thing may have sensed his energy while trying to find him. Not trying to seal his fate or anything, but it could be something like the spirit of his father who lived in the neighborhood. The father suddenly passed away at a younger age from heart problems. I never asked if he passed at their home, but it's very, very much possible. I'm pretty sure the father was good friends with the original owner of my house, so it would be a familiar place to him. I ask that you please pray for my friend. I will not say his name. A strange request after our conversations, but I still believe in prayer. Although most of what church and religion added has been broken, things like the power of prayer remain undeniable, which I believe that. At the end of the day, when the storm comes, the sand all washes away, and what remains is the foundation standing on rocks. Take care, and I'm sorry to keep writing you books. Sophie, we love that you write us books, and we definitely appreciate that as well too. And I don't know how your friend is now, but I do hope that he made a full recovery, and that figure outside your house was not anything ominous. Which John and I, we took a little bit of a break, during this episode, and we kind of discussed how we were going to close it. And I think John had a pretty good idea, but we've been talking so much about quantum immortality and the phasing between realities and when you die, what happens. I think this will lead us into our next episode, and hopefully we'll have Mikey on with us to kind of elaborate some on that subject too. But that next topic will be about near-death experiences, and does that open up doors to, I guess, a closeness to the paranormal? Does that invite things in? And maybe you can more eloquently say that better than me.
No, I think I think you said it well. But I mean, like we talked about. Consciousness being on, different frequencies, and those kinds of things. So, like when you pass, nobody really knows what happens to the brain. Like it just kind of shuts down, but there's not really any a lot of evidence or data about it. So, when your brain changes or your consciousness changes, going through these different frequencies or vibrations or states, does that open doorways? Is it create a kind of magnetism or a signal that could something or someone or another frequency could pick up on, and does that open that door to any kind of outside contact, maybe?
Yeah.
I think it's a good.
So I think we'll slap a fancy title on that by then. But yeah, I think John put that a lot better than I did. It's that's going to be something I think that we can definitely bounce off. John's not wrong. This is definitely a subject we can probably talk about. And whenever we took our water break, I believe he kept saying this is definitely something that we're going to keep coming back to. There's way too much material here, to probably keep it to just one episode, but I'd like to thank Sophie for bringing all this to our attention, and I hope that she's well. I hope that she's safe. I hope that her friend is doing better, and we'll definitely hold both of them in our prayers, and we'll definitely do a follow-up with her to make sure that she is safe and sound. We are the Wendibros, and I'm with John tonight.
Yep. Having fun.
Yeah, and he's with Doug tonight.
Yeah, I'm with
Doug. So we just did our first real investigation last year, and we did come upon some things, and some things that I could not explain, and I'm not even a firm believer in a lot of that stuff. So we tend to handle a lot of things with scrutiny. So if you need investigations, that's something that we can do, especially since we're all in the same area now. And I think John and I have some big plans for stuff like that too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of haunted history in Appalachia. So there's no telling what we may end up in. So make sure you check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. It's all under the Wendibros for those. And it's very easy to find us on there too. So if you have a story, make sure that you reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to speak with you. There's been a few that we've turned away, but there's been a lot that we've taken the time to really follow back with and make sure we do our due diligence on that too. Make sure you check out Strangers When We Meet, and if you need anything legal-wise, check out leannewarren.com, which is the website for our business. And everybody, if you got a boo, you better call a bro.
Call a bro.
Call a bro.
And that, my lovely humans, concludes another curious excursion through time, mind, and probability with your favorite entangled group of mystery solvers, the Wendibros. This strange and wonderful project was dreamed into existence by the trifecta of mystery, Michael Langford, John Fluce, and Doug Herbert. Produced and edited by Doug Herbert, who turns late-night ramblings into midnight revelations. And speaking of revelations, John Fluce's debut album, Love, Loss and Liquor, with his band Strangers When We Meet, is a hauntingly beautiful soundtrack for broken hearts. Find it on all major streaming platforms, where real music still lives. This episode was brought to you in part by Leanne Warren LLC, a proud Appalachian-rooted business located in Northeast Tennessee. Founded by Doug and Christy Herbert, they provide investigative services, notary work, efficient duties, and truly grounded business solutions. If you're looking for real people helping real people, wander over to leannewarren.com to see how they can help you too. Leanne Warren is proud to be a partner of the Sources Over Appalachia Festival in Bristol, Virginia on June 14th. There might be a certain alien there that will have instructions to get 10% off of your first service. Want to meet the Wendibros in the flesh? You'll find them at the Sources Over Appalachia Festival in Bristol, Virginia, June 14th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Look for the booth that smells like coffee and conspiracy theories. I heard that they will be giving a poster to anyone who tells a truly captivating tale. Hurry though, they'll only have 50 posters on hand. Until next time, keep your frequencies open, your timelines stable, and your mirrors covered after dark. This is the Wendibot, signing off, but not gone. After all, in at least one universe, I never left.